everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today's video is PhD, Rejecting the Priesthood of Official Science, from vaccines to climate to relativity. Haven't made a video in a couple weeks, just been extremely busy, and there's only so much that to talk about that everyone else isn't already talking about. Been sparring with some relativity cultists, some acolytes of Einstein on one of the old ether physics videos, just to, for recreation, to make sure that, I'm still sharp in terms of all of my arguments and perspectives against the cult of relativity. And, there's a lot of different things that are coming to the forefront now, but everything is kind of tied into this ultimate kind of battle between those who are in the priesthood of official science and those who worship them and accept all of their dictates without question, and the rest of humanity, which is kind of just laboring under the yoke of these edicts, whether it's the COVID lockdowns or, the looming Green New Deal and, climate socialism, or just basically the fact that our energy paradigm is still basically tethered to the defunct, modalities of the old world, rather than allowed to move forward and bring forth those new technologies for energy and propulsion that we should have already had, right? People wonder, where's the flying car? It's 2021, we should have already had flying cars, we should have already mastered gravity, At the same time, I just watched the other day the SpaceX their Spaceship 10 rocket launch, where they just launched it up to 10,000 meters and then dropped it back down, and then it basically landed on, I didn't really realize before that point, I thought it was kind of impossible for a rocket to re-land itself, but the funny thing is, while I switched the YouTube streaming to that, and while I was watching it, I was like, this has got to be like a CGI or a model or something. This looks completely fake. I'm not saying that it is fake. I'm just saying that my first reaction upon watching it was, this looks entirely computer animated. This looks fake. But, I don't really know. It probably is real. Who knows at this point? Reality and computer-generated reality are now very, very blurred, right? From the Grammys, which now basically were over the weekend and had basically a virtual riot in one of their presentations and songs of, a black man getting shot in the back by the cops. And meanwhile, outside the building, there's literally a mostly peaceful protest, and the CNN reporter standing in front of a burning building. So again, computer-generated reality and the reaction that it engenders in this reality, very hard to distinguish, especially for people who are locked into that media program, right? Art imitates life, and life imitates art, as always. But it's really kind of the tripartite, right? And they're based of vaccines, of climate, and of relativity. And most people don't really, get the whole game with relativity as well. But they will, especially as, the civilian, the people, they get closer to these energy technologies and disproving, basically the mechanisms that have held up, this world. Again, we've been languishing under the technology that was really, invented over a century ago. And, the entire, all of the 100% of the electrical world that we know today was made essentially by Tesla, Charles Proteus Steinmetz, Oliver Heaviside, right? And then before them was, Maxwell. And all of these things, everything in this digital world, nothing, can really be attributed to Einstein. It can all be attributed to these individuals. And all of them accepted the nature of essentially electricity. There has to be an underlying substrate. The ether is not something necessarily that is proven or disproven by any experiment. It is literally a logical necessity for any of the electromagnetic spectrum and any of the phenomena of the universe to exist. There's no such thing as a wave, right? A wave is what, as Ken Wheeler likes to say, a wave is what something does, not what something is. There's no such thing as a wave without a substrate, without a medium, right? What would a wave be without the ocean, right? The waves on the ocean have the ocean itself. They are the movement of the ocean. Sound waves are the motion of the air, and the electromagnetic spectrum and the waves therein are the movement of the ether. From light to radio waves, microwave, gamma rays, it's all basically just the rippling of the ether in different spectra. And there's no way around that. Regardless of what people want to say about Michelson-Morley or Dayton Miller's work, or all the different aspects of, Sagnac, of how, the anisotropy of light speed can be demonstrated, that it is not a constant. It is a logical necessity. There just is no such thing as rippling of something that is nothing, right? And in the quantum world, they try and get around it. They'll call it the quantum field. It's the fluctuating quantum field. But it's just trying to say the ether while denying that the ether doesn't exist, right? How can nothing ripple? How can a vacuum vibrate? It makes no sense at all. There has to be an underlying substrate for waves to be rippling, for fluctuations to be registered in any, in any possible way. And, it's it's again, as Ken Wheeler likes to say, the vision of nature as a crazy crack-addicted chick with a calculator and a bag of magic particles, or basically the view of nature as a hippie chick wearing a hemp skirt and muddy feet, right? Nature is just a automatic pressure mediation, essentially, machine. Everything exists in a natural harmony, and there is a logic underpinning everything. I understand biology. I never actually studied it through college, but the reason that I didn't take it in college is because essentially my advanced placement courses in high school, which are basically college level courses in high school, I basically aced all of them, so that I came into college with a whole bunch of credits from passing college level courses in high school. And I decided to go the route of humanities because I realized in my later teen years that the source of true power is not just in memorizing equations and being able to do math and just knowing this little arcane microcosm of science, but to know essentially the wider realm of knowledge, to be well balanced, to be able to communicate knowledge to other people is really the true skill. Because if you have all the knowledge in the universe but it's locked up inside your head, it's really of zero value, it's of zero utility. Unless you yourself are going to be, building all of the machines, and you're not going to interact with, any other person while you build a flying saucer and a nuclear reactor, which of course is impossible. At every meaningful level, you have to engage with other people, and thus it really will come down to how well you can interact with them and convey what you know and how to receive what other people know. Because that's the other thing, is no matter how much of a genius people think they are, ultimately there are other people who can contribute to you. Even if you are the master of your domain, you've got to work on a team with other people who are, at least good enough in their domain, if not the masters of their domain. And it's the absolute, total, unquestioning faith in the hyper-specialized divisions of science is what we get today. It's the fracturing of the mind, that basically people just assume that, these people who got PhDs, right, the priesthood, they basically must have thought of all these things. They must have, gone through all of this training, and that makes them, qualified to speak, and no one can challenge them, right? Whether it's the LIGO experiment supposedly detecting gravitational waves, they must have checked to make sure that it wasn't just, basically chirps in the global electric circuit. They must have checked to see that basically it wasn't all these other things involved with the electrified Earth. But really, in their narrative and in their study, they don't. It's basically all a self-referential confirmation device for the theories that they already hold. And it's just one big gravy train, of big physics and big science. Again, billions of dollars being spent just to supposedly smash particles together, but they're not actually particles. There's really only one fundamental particle. It's the hydrogen atom. It's basically the proton, right? Neutrons, essentially, are fleeting particles. There's just really the fundamental proton particle, and otherwise the electron is just a measured packet of energy surrounding it. But there's again, Heaviside and Steinmetz, and Tesla, they didn't treat the electron as an actual particle. It was just a conception. Similarly, there is no photon. All of these particles that are based on that, understanding of the photon, just because waves arrive in quantized packets, right? Waves hit the shore in discrete units. That doesn't mean that the wave is in itself an individual particle. It's still a movement of the underlying substrate. So similarly, we register these quantized packets of energy on these different spectra, and we say, oh, this is a photon, and this is a boson, and this is a quason and a flyson, but it's really all just different phenomena within the electromagnetic spectrum, and that are registering in quantized packets that we then treat in our conception as a particle, but it's not really a particle. Everything is just the movement of the ether perturbation modalities. And it's all a form of electricity, of electrical force moving through that substrate. The entire universe and all its phenomena is just basically is matter and as protons and different numbers and configurations and perturbation of the ether. And all it's just funny again how we assume that these people who are these PhDs and these scientists basically know all these things, but they really don't. They get locked into their own little hyper-specialized world, and they never actually look at the wider picture. And so everyone's basically in their little box, and they learn how to, quack like a duck and speak the language of this own little world of hyper-specialized academic, modalities, and then it's like, they just get lost in the weeds. And the entire, all of humanity suffers because the universe doesn't operate in these discrete little boxes, right? The universe operates as one coherent field. Everything is connected to everything else. And it's again, when we think of the body in that realm, the vaccinology modality is basically just thinking that, we can tweak the immune system, and we can just upload a USB stick to that computer, and it'll just register this genetic information, and then it'll have some immunity to these different substances. And now with the mRNA vaccines, some of the vaccine companies, they're literally likening it to a USB stick, right? It's a messenger RNA. It's going into the body and just telling the cells of the body to form a spike protein that is, on the surface of the coronavirus, and thus it'll have immunity. So it's not even giving you a piece of the coronavirus like most old vaccines do. It's basically just uploading a USB stick into your cells and telling it to make a spike protein. And from that point on, every cell in your body makes this foreign spike protein, and we don't know the consequences of that. They keep referring to it as, the FDA approved vaccines for COVID. None of them have been approved. An emergency use authorization is not the same as an approval. But we've just, even the FDA has an FAQ sheet showing essentially, yes, there are no FDA approved vaccines. An emergency use authorization is not the same as an approval. But meanwhile, the Facebook fact checkers and all these other quacks in the realm of social media will essentially, go around assuming that an emergency use authorization is the same thing as an approval. And if you say anything otherwise, again, they know more than the FDA, I guess, who are the ones themselves who are issuing the authorizations and approvals. It's again, this worship of science goes farther than the science itself. It is a narrative management control, and a narrative management and control. And it's really sickening. I hate these people in all seriousness. I balance myself out and make sure that it doesn't interfere with other parts of my life. Again, there's so many things to be grateful for, so many things that I love. I love my family. I love the work that I do. I love the place that I live in, even despite the fact that it's in California. I love El Dorado County, right? But I truly despise these people that worship science. Again, these are the ones who are keeping the schools closed. These are the ones that are keeping restaurants closed. These are the people that are keeping everyone, essentially worshiping at the feet of this priesthood, and not letting any challengers come to the forefront. Again, we could have had flying cars by now. We could have had, private flying saucers. We could have had free energy. but they won't let anything challenge the dogma. It's basically just, again, this big circle jerk of people. Peer review is supposed to be this gold standard, but realistically, it's just the same. It's this small group of people who are holding a death grip on all the information that's coming forward in the journals. And then if you publish in one of the lesser controlled journals, then they basically say, oh, that's a quackery journal. That's not a real journal. That's a pay-to-publish journal. And they'll basically dismiss anything that's not in their little hyper-controlled, world. Same thing with if you link to a website that isn't, the mainstream media, then they'll link to some media bias fact check. And it's funny, you go to the media's bias fact check, and it's just, it itself, again, is this same, circle jerk. It's hyper partisan and biased, review of these different media outlets. And most of the reasons that they'll basically discredit a source is like, oh, it peddles climate denialism and vaccine denialism. It's like asking questions and presenting information does not equate to denying, right? They say that, oh, we deny the climate because we question whether or not, the energy budget of a flat Earth, which the climate model is based on, an energy budget of a flat, planar Earth, is valid. And, again, they call us flat earthers, but really their own climate model is based on a flat, plane conception of Earth. It doesn't take into account any of the particle forcing upon the Earth's climate. It doesn't actually even represent the thermal aspects well. It doesn't even record the total solar irradiance in a meaningful sense. It is again a candy-ass kindergarten level understanding of the climate, but we are supposed to accept it and worship it as if it is this pinnacle science on par with, Michael Faraday and, Isaac Newton and all the rest. It's just a complete facade. And, and Nikola Tesla didn't have a formal college training, right? Most of the people who invented our world, they didn't have formal education. Maybe they had some in certain cases, but again, it wasn't that formal education that gave them the spark that led them forward. The spark that led them forward and created new things and new paradigms in the world is the ability to tie in that general perspective of seeing how other things connect that aren't in that world. The people who are locked in their hyper-specialized boxes, they literally can't bring forward anything that's truly revolutionary. They might make tiny little advances within their little box, but you have to connect things to the bigger picture if you want to change the world. And so that is really, where I decided to widen my latitude and not get into a hyper-specialized discipline, at an early age. For a lot of my life, again, I was gifted and talented program. I haven't taken an IQ test for many years because I don't really care to compare myself to other people, but I was always basically in these little genius programs, and until I basically realized that the school system was trying to brainwash me. When I actually started arguing against and questioning the tenets of what they were teaching rather than just memorizing it, that's when the problem started. And that's when I realized, okay, just searching for greater accolades and trying to get, pats on the head from these people is not going to work. I'm going to have to basically break free and go in a different path. Otherwise, I'm going to be locked in this control matrix and, basically be in line for mediocrity like everyone else. And that's not for me. So even if I had to give up the illusion and the pretense of being a genius and all these pats on the heads, I was still at least internally going to maintain my integrity and maintain that actual spark of divinity, that spark of genius in a true sense, to keep moving forward. Even again, if people call you foolish, if they call you silly, and if they call you, just a conspiracy theorist, it's all worth it, because ultimately, again, you maintain that truth, right? Would you rather be good at sex and have everybody think that you're bad at sex? Or would you rather be bad at sex and have everybody think that you're good at sex? Just for a rough analogy, for me, it's basically, I'd rather the truth my internal truth be the real thing. I'd rather be good at sex and have everybody think that I'm bad, because it's the difference between people constantly being disappointed when they actually get to know you, or people getting very excited when they get to know you. If you're content with being a constant disappointment to people in a real sense, then yeah, go for the illusion, go for the external sheen and show. Because if you worship those accolades and that external power and fame, then basically go for it. But inside you'll be rotting. Inside you'll be decaying and degenerating and degrading. But that's not for me. We will constantly renew ourselves, right? Though the body may decay, you'll be renewed constantly in your mind, to paraphrase a Bible quote, I believe, from Corinthians. And it's again, renew thy mind and constantly align yourself with this creation that God made, this natural world that is filled with all these amazing things, and all of it is in perfect balance. Everything is connected and in a perfect state of balance, including the immune system of the body. There's no need to hijack it with vaccines. There's no need to basically modify it. Just nutrify the body, give it what it needs, that clean air, clean water, and nutrients, and you will be fine. It's again, everybody in my household might have already had COVID, but we wouldn't know because we didn't have any symptoms, right? If you are healthy and you don't have any symptoms, what's the point of injecting something foreign into your body to try and prevent that thing from happening? It's like, I'm going to get sick ahead of time so that I don't get sick down the line. And again, there's people dying from the vaccines, but they're not allowed to ascribe it to the vaccine, right? Every single death that ever happened is a COVID death, but all these deaths that happen immediately after the vaccines, they have nothing to do with the vaccine. That's just an underlying condition, right? It's all completely silly. And again, there's all this dogma in relativity. Again, it's so easy to build a free energy machine ultimately when you cast aside relativity and this conception of space as this dead and propertyless thing, but at the same time it can bend, right? Space-time. They think that time is equivalent with space, and that basically, they basically send these clocks up in the air and send them around the world, and they essentially register slight differentiations in the recorded time, even though, again, even an atomic clock is based off of the microwave oscillations of the cesium atom. And so if you're changing the speed of light by going in different directions through the medium of the ether, which is rotating with the Earth, it's going to basically fundamentally change that rate of induction, that rate of oscillation, and the measurement in the crystal oscillator. It's funny that we accept that time itself has changed because these clocks have changed, the measurement has changed, and thus the fabric of time has changed itself. It's just silly. It's like if I broke a ruler in half and then I say, oh, look, length itself has changed. No, the measurement of the length has changed. Your recording of it has changed. Your observation and perspective has changed. That doesn't mean the fabric of the universe itself has changed. And, I watched a movie over the weekend called Einstein Wrong. And, there's this one PhD in mathematics from MIT, and she talks about how she got access to essentially the data behind the atomic clock experiment. And basically, most of the clocks did not align with relativity. There were a couple that did, and they used those and then said, oh, see, it proved Einstein right. Same thing as the 1919 Eddington eclipse, right? They're using these photo plates, super low resolution photo plates, and trying to measure the deflection of light around the sun. And basically most of them don't align with the relativist prediction, but they take the ones that do and say, look, it proved it all right. It's a complete joke. It's cherry-picking data, and we're supposed to accept of this as the most revolutionary undertaking and results in all of science. But, again, there's a refractive medium of plasma in the corona of the sun would also bend the light, right? There's no reason for gravity to be doing what was observed, assuming that it was accurate, which there have been subsequent experiments which, supposedly verified it. But again, if the plasma around the sun is a refractive medium, it makes sense that it would bend the light. And everything in this universe is electric, everything is connected, everything is alive and conscious. And so anybody who tells me otherwise, I don't care if they have a PhD, it's all just a bunch of quackery. And I will not be dictated to by a bunch of quacks. And so that's my video today. We'll continue more on this as always, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Ah.